Hey, this is Danny here from Podcast Stories. Thanks so much for listening, and I'd love for you to get the latest episodes when they're released. So make sure to follow on your favourite podcast app or hop on over to podcasterstories.com/listen. If you enjoy the show and want to support it, you can do that at podcasterstories.com/support to join other supporters just like you. Thanks so much for being part of the Podcaster Stories community. And now, here's this week's episode.
You mean well, like you have a good spirit and a good idea in your head that, oh, I need to experience and understand things for myself, which is great, which is fine. However, there are some things that you cannot reinvent the wheel, because then every 100 years somebody would need to reinvent the wheel because he would not believe that the wheel exists.
Hi, and welcome to Podcaster Stories. Each show we'll have a conversation with podcasters across all mediums and share their story, what motivates them, why they started their show, how they grew their show, and more. We'll also talk about their personal lives and some of the things that have happened that have made them the person they are today. And now, here's your host, Danny Brown. Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Podcaster Stories, where we meet the people behind the voices of the shows we listen to. This week we have Lefteris Statharas of the Lefteris Asks Science podcast, and I'm going to hopefully say I got your name correct here.
Very correct, yeah.
Okay, if not, I sincerely apologise. Now, the Lefteris Asks Science podcast is a really cool podcast that gets different scientists on to talk about various levels of expertise in different topics and different fields of science, and it tries to make science fun and educational while getting to know the people. So Lefteris, thanks for appearing on the show, and I'll hand it over to you to maybe tell us a little bit more about yourself and your podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. It's a real pleasure to be a guest. So I started the podcast in December last year, where basically I wanted to meet the people behind the research, because I did my PhD and I've been in academia for about 10 years. So through academia, I've met so many people and I've seen so much of the technology and science that it seems to me that it was quite mature even in academia, but it's not really applied outside for XYZ reasons, right? So I really wanted, and every time I was speaking with people who are not in academia, they always have like that idea that people in the universities are either stealing our money, which is, well, some people think that, or that people are very, very smart and like you cannot touch them because there's this on a pedestal. And I just wanted to show people that there's what people do in academia is interesting. It is hard, obviously, but what it is just basically people taking the time. Basically, if you're doing a PhD for 4 years, you're just looking at one thing. So even if it seems complex at the end, like the steps are quite simple, that really everybody can do it if you just like basically decide that you want to invest the time in your life to get a PhD or to do research or anything. So that's how I started the podcast after I finished my PhD.
Okay, and I know, looking at your show, as you mentioned, you started it earlier this year, and already there's been like a pretty good variety of scientists, come on to talk with you. I noticed that there was one that was talking about the science of bubbles and its impact on materials, which I thought was really, really cool. And there was another one, obviously, I think there was one about the evolution of language and how that evolves over time. Yeah. You mentioned that you're doing a PhD, or you're finishing your PhD, or finished PhD. Is there a particular science that you're drawn to, either from your own, studies, or from the guests maybe that you've spoken to up to now?
Well, I was trained in material science, and mechanical engineering, so that's where I'm like naturally tend to go when like my day job is in mechanical engineering and material science. So that's what I enjoy doing. But when I started doing the podcast, I realized that I started speaking with people who had spent a lot of their time and effort, and they got excited about linguistics or cavities like the bubbles. So it dawned to me that like everything can be quite interesting. Everything can be very interesting if you actually see it from their perspective. So every time I have somebody on the show, I'm trying to see why they get excited to talk about their work, because sometimes it's not only, ooh, I get to talk about myself and my work, but at the same time it's like, ooh, the work, like I chose to do this and spend 4 years or 8 years or whatever, because this excites me. So I enjoyed like trying to find that why it gets exciting for them.
Right. And I'm wondering, I know, I mean, I was never great at science at school. I loved the subjects, but I wasn't academically great at science. And sometimes I wonder if the word itself, science, puts a lot of people off because it has this sort of grey-haired, vision, if you like. You talk about scientists in movies and books, and they're always these guys in the white lab coats and very stereotyped.
Yeah.
And I wonder, is this something that we're now starting to realise, you know what, science is pretty cool, it's pretty fun. I know my kids' schools, for example, are really emphasising science and STEM, etc., over, say, traditional math and English, which I think is awesome. So do you think we're starting to see maybe a flip over the last, I don't know, 5-10 years or so, maybe more, between how science is viewed and accepted, if you like?
Yeah, I feel that in the past couple of years, like, for pop culture, you see a lot of all in the movies and the TV series, you see scientists in their eureka moments, which is not the real aspect of science, really. Like it in the span of like a year that you're working on something, it will happen maybe once if you're lucky. It's like, that's the thing that I figured out, and that's what I was missing from my. Or even if you find it, it's that eureka moment for the scientist is so much like, I'm missing one parameter for my equation, that's why it didn't work. So it's not like very flashy, but at the same time, I think like it's been a lot of effort from like science communicators like Neil deGrasse Tyson, Bill Nye the Science Guy. So there were people who became more famous because they were talking about science. So I guess that's why, like, slowly, and it's my optimistic side of saying, like, well, hopefully people will start to see that it's good to go on that way and try to have a discussion about scientific principles and try to have a discussion about scientific discoveries and how you can use them in everyday life and how can they affect society. And hopefully, like, people slowly tend to go towards there and like bring the discussion over.
Right. And I know, I mean, here in Canada, we had a huge, not so much on a science point of view, but well, there was, I'll correct myself there, a couple of, maybe 4 years back, Chris Hadfield, the first Canadian scientist, the first Canadian astronaut to go into space, and he was doing some, science experiments up there, and he was live streaming, live feeding back, and there was a whole bunch of kids in schools were all getting, they're like, all the schools were getting the classes together to watch the live stream, and it was huge here in Canada. I think, to your point, where people are now picking up and seeing it in a fun way, and how the message and how the education, if you like, is being put across. I kind of think back to the whole Mentos and the Diet Pepsi experiment. You drop 3 or 4 Mentos into the and that talks about propulsion, which I think is awesome. If I got taught that at school,
exactly.
Who knows? But I think that's definitely a really good point you make about how that message is being shared now.
Yeah, social media has helped a lot. Like the fact that you could actually see posts from the ISS and like see like the astronauts that have been in space share their own stories and social media and their own pictures. So that I feel that's helped a lot, because I guess the new generation, not the new generation, like I guess I'm part of it because I'm not that old. We grew up with the internet, and there was YouTube, there was Facebook, there was Twitter later. So we grew up with these avenues of communication, so we could see more and more science being pushed there.
Yeah, and it's interesting to watch. I mean, obviously, we were speaking earlier in the green room, and we were talking about how life's a little bit different at the moment based on where we normally be.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking one of the good things, if anything good can come from the current pandemic, is that science is coming more to the fore. We're looking to our scientists to help us and to educate us, which previously that might have not been the case. And I wonder if this is also maybe like a turning point where people are starting to wake up, hey, we should believe more in science as opposed to, the populist belief that, scientists is just, cookie stories or whatever. I don't know, what's your take on how that's like playing out?
Well, internet is a weird rabbit hole that you could end up from, like I'm seeing videos or reading about how the coronavirus affects people and how you should like treatment, or are they going to find the vaccine and things like that. And then you very fast, I don't know if it's my rabbit hole or anything, you go to people saying like, you should not wear masks because masks give you carbon dioxide poisoning, or and the earth is flat and global warming is not a thing. So that scares me a bit. So how easy people tend to fall into those rabbit holes and don't understand what a theory is, and they don't understand how scientists work and what a peer review study is. So one of the thing that sparked me to actually start the podcast, because I had the idea for the podcast for a very long time, but I read a news article, a popular news article about how somebody did some drug tests on mice about the Alzheimer's disease. And I was on Reddit and I read the article, and then I read the comments on Reddit, and the vast majority of the comments were like, well, I saw this news article, like similar news article last year, but the big pharma companies don't want you to have the Alzheimer's disease drug because that's how they make money, or blah, 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 blah. And I'm not a doctor, a medical doctor. I'm not a biologist, but I understand that they try this on mice, and there are like steps where you go from mice to humans, and then you have to try it in humans and see if it works. And then you understand that I understood, like, actually we lose more money if we treat Alzheimer's patients right now. It will be much more cheaper if we actually have a drug and like cure them from Alzheimer's. It's more expensive to pay for their treatment for a very long period of time. So nobody wins by not having the cure for Alzheimer's.
Right.
So that's when I read this, and I'm like, I had a friend who was doing research in Alzheimer's, and I get to talk to her supervisor. That's how I started doing the research, the podcast rather. Sorry.
No, and I think that's a great point. I know, like, I see some discussions on Facebook. It really, if I had any hair, I'd pull it out because it's just it's just that bad. But it's to your point. I think a lot of it's there's so much deflection and deliberate ignorance, and like you say, it's scary, and it's good to see that more people are pushing back and saying, you know what, no, we need to trust the scientific community. That they're not in it for some big ego stroke or whatever. Like, some,
exactly.
Farm or politics or whatever. But yeah, so now obviously, like we mentioned earlier, the podcast has got a wide variety of guests, and it's really cool to see what different topics like pop up. Of the people we've spoken with so far, either on the published episodes or any that you have on the back burner ready to be scheduled, etc., is there any that have kind of stood out for you in particular, and if so, why that particular topic or show?
That's an interesting question. So I like to pick two episodes. There was one that I had, Angeline de Dios. She is a Filipino scholar working in Hong Kong, and she is studying Filipino migrant musicians and how what is their experience in working overseas. And that was actually the longest, because I try to have my podcast be like 20-25 minutes long, because I know science is like scary for people, so I try to like make it to bite-sized pieces so that it's easier to digest. But that interview lasted for about 2 hours. So because it was very funny to me, because I asked her a question, her answer was long-winded, and in the middle of it, I was like, oh, this is not what I asked. Where are we going? And then it made a long turn to answer the eventual question that I had in the beginning. So that was very interesting to me to see how different scholars from a different science, like cultural science, because I have no background in cultural sciences, how that worked, how their mind worked, and how more complex social studies are than me going in the lab, putting A and B together. It works. And the other one I enjoyed is the one that's coming next week. No, actually, rather tomorrow. I got to interview two astronomers who did their own calculations, and they derived a new equation about how many communicating civilizations are there in our galaxy.
Okay.
So, and they came up with the number 36, and I was trying to understand how many things do you have to consider to say, like, okay, why not 35? Why not? So it was interesting. It was also challenging because it was the first time I was interviewing two people at the same time for the podcast. So right. I was not. It was usually it's one-on-one. So it was challenging technically because it was a different way to ask questions for specific people, and it was astronomy is always. It's easy to get lost in astronomy because we have that age-old question of like, where are we? Where do we come from? Where are we going? So, and it was fun. It was very interesting to me to see how, by looking how many other galaxies, how many other communicating civilizations are in our galaxy, there is a way to actually see how long can we expect our civilization to exist.
Right.
So it was a nice way to look outside, but learn more about yourself. So that was a nice realization during that podcast. And
that comes out tomorrow, right?
Yes, that comes out tomorrow.
I'll listen to that. My son and I, we just moved up up north from the city last November, so our skies are a lot clearer. There's no city smog or anything, and he's really getting into looking at the stars and wanting to know which ones and which of the galaxies are. And I used to be able to tell that when I was about his age, but I've sort of lost track of it. And I'm sure he'll be interested to hear that as well, because he's really into are we the only people here? What's that up there? Are they different planets, etc.? So that'll be a good one. I'll look forward to that. Now I know we'd spoken earlier. We sort of kind of eased into it, but I'm curious just to maybe revisit we were talking about how science is getting a more respected, if that's the right word. I don't mean to dilute anything, but that might be the wrong word. I apologise if it is. But I'm curious, why do you think there is such an anti-science stance in some countries? I mean, some are better than others, a lot better than others. And I guess maybe you look at the US at the moment, and what's happening from the leadership and how that sort of negates what science does or what it can do. And I'm just curious. Is there anything that you found in your own personal life or personal studies or professional life that you've seen people push back against science for particular reasons or beliefs or anything?
I feel that most of the time that I've met people that they say that they're not against science. So most of the people that are against science, they don't believe that they're against science. So I'm trying to come from the places like, you mean well, like you have a good spirit and a good idea in your head that, I need to experience and understand things for myself, which is great, which is fine. However, there are some things that you cannot reinvent the wheel, because then every 100 years somebody would need to reinvent the wheel because he would not believe that the wheel exists.
Right.
Because I will not believe the books or my teacher who said that the wheel exists. I will try to prove it myself. So you would hit the roadblock. Like every 100 or so years, you would be like, nothing is happening moving forward. So that's what I'm trying to explain to people, that when they say like, well, I don't believe everything that the teacher tells me or everything that I see on... That's a funny bit, especially in Greece, is like, I don't believe everything that they tell me on television, and then they go on YouTube and believe what they see on YouTube, which this is a funny way to explain to them. Well, it's the same thing.
Right. Yeah.
It's like moving pictures on a screen. It's basically lack of formal education plays a role, I guess. But at the same time, I feel that a lot of science communicators and educators, maybe they don't have the patience to deal with these people, because I think Neil deGrasse Tyson in some discussion I said that, if an argument takes longer than 5 minutes, then I'm out.
Right.
Some people are stubborn, and some people require a bit more effort. And if nobody gives that effort, then nobody will help them eventually.
Yeah, so it's like trying to find that fine line, I guess, between acceptance from non-believers or skeptics to, like you say, maybe patience from the other side.
Yeah.
And because I can understand that as well, because I mean, I know I would get super frustrated if I was trying to do my job and I was getting the same question time and time again, or the same pushback time and time again. I think I'd get at some stage I'd run out of patience. So you know what? Good luck. Go do whatever you want to do. So I get that completely.
Yeah, I also have that as well. But I'm not the most patient person in the world, but I'm trying to, if I see that the person is well spirited and he's not combative, like right off the bat from this beginning of the conversation, then I would probably make the extra effort and try and see where we can find the common ground. But yes, if they start trying to explain to me why the Earth is flat and why I have been tricked and I've been lied to by my teachers and by the astronomy and everything, then it's a lost battle. So
yeah, it reminds me of that Facebook meme about, I'm not sure if it was like an actual meme or not, or like if it was an actual post by the page, but it was like the Flat Earther Society or something like that. And the copy that went with the picture that they put up was people around the globe are finally realizing the truth about flat Earth. And the first commenter says, "Did you realize what you just said? The globe." Yeah. So like, I don't know if that was like a Photoshop one, but I always think back to that one. Thinking of like anti-science or deniers or whatever. Yeah. Now, I know you'd mentioned that you're in Singapore. You're originally from Greece, but you've been in Singapore for the last
5 years.
5 years. Yeah. What have you found been the biggest difference, or the biggest difference possibly, between, say, science and how it's approached in Singapore versus science and how it's approached in Greece or back in Europe? Or
well, Singapore has a lot more money than Greece, so it's much easier to do science here. However, that's one thing we were discussing with my coworkers. It's kind of a double-edged sword, because what I've seen a lot of times here, that let's say we have a problem and it's me and some other local person who is trying to solve it. They have a methodology. So okay, this problem has 100 different methods of being resolved that maybe is resolved. Like one of those 100 methods will work to solve this problem. Here they will start, okay, method 1, let's start, it didn't work, okay, method 2. In Greece, because we haven't had the money, because we haven't had the ease of access to some equipment or whatever, we've always tried to see, okay, to find the best way to do this. So from the beginning, we're saying, okay, I don't have all these resources. So from the 100 methods that are available, maybe these 15 are more probable. It's the most probable way of this working. So I'll start with those 15 first. So I guess the critical thinking aspect maybe sometimes lacks, but they're so hardworking, they can catch up very fast. So it does not really impede the whole process of research, because they're so hardworking and they will stick to it and do it until it's done.
It's a good trait to have.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now, just to flip it over a little bit, just like a fun little thing. what's something that not a lot of people would know about you that might surprise them if they found out?
What we were discussing with my girlfriend, my partner, recently is that I seem like a person that has a lot of patience, but there are some things that, even though like a person like me who has a lot of patience would do it, I would just flip out in a fraction of a second, because I don't know, like maybe that's I've had enough, like I don't know, but I guess well, maybe a better answer to this, because that's a boring answer, is that I have a playlist on my Deezer. I use streaming platform instead of Spotify. I use Deezer. Mm-hmm. I have a playlist that's called Miserable Music.
Okay.
And I listen to that in order to seem happy to other people.
Oh, wow.
So instead of showing my anger or sadness to other people, I tend to channel this into the music that I listen to. So I have a playlist called Miserable Music, and I just listen to that a lot.
Okay. And what kind of artist would be on that then?
It's a big range. There's a Canadian artist called Devin Townsend.
Okay.
Who has some ambient music, which is quite sad. Sometimes there's some English music, Anathema or Radiohead. Some music from Radiohead is quite melancholic for sure. Porcupine Tree, things like that I enjoy listening and
being happy on the outside.
Exactly.
That's cool. That's a different approach to have like melancholy music to project happiness. So you're like, that's cool.
Yeah, I vent my sadness and anger through music.
Yeah, and if this is like this question sometimes pops up. It just depends if it jumps in or not. Who's your all-time hero and why that person?
I always look up to my father, because he was fair to his detriment. He was very fair. Like even when he's a mechanical engineer, he is not in academia, but there are a lot of times where for example, somebody would ask him for his help, and a job that he got paid for, but he could have been paid for much more.
Right.
And that was to his detriment a lot of times. But he never stopped trying, and he never stopped trying to learn things, and he never stopped making effort to provide for everything that he could. So my father is definitely high up there.
And is that where you mentioned he was in mechanical engineering? Is that where you got your interest and love for it from?
Yeah, definitely. My brother is a mechanical engineer as well, so we're a family of engineers. I definitely got my incline towards engineering from my dad, where, for example, when my brother is 5 years older, and when he got his first car, he did not get a new car, he did not get a good used car. What we did is we got a 1974 Mini Cooper, which was in a very, very bad shape, and we started building it from the ground up to find out how cars work and why they work that way. And so that was a nice learning experience to cars, for example.
Right.
So that was his way of teaching us, basically. He's like, okay, you're driving, but you're gonna earn your driver experience.
Oh, that's cool. And what a great car to build on as well, like the Mini Cooper. It's like
exactly.
Just such a historic, iconic vehicle. And you still have that? Is that car still running about?
Both me and my brother left Greece. Okay. So it was our car. So it stayed immobile for a year. And then we went back, and it needed a month and a half of repairs. So we kind of sold it after that, okay. Because nobody was using it. My dad had his own car for his work, and my mom was staying at home. So,
cool. Well, Lefteris, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. I've had
Pleasure.
a blast chatting with you, and I'm really looking forward to the episode coming out tomorrow. Like I said, I know my son will be super stoked because he loves astronomy. And I just think it's a cool topic for you to have scientists come on and sort of demystify and not de-escalate, that's a rubbish word to describe it. Take away the fear, I guess, the unknown behind science. What's your goals with the podcast and future shows and guests, etc.?
Well, the bigger the better. The show for me, like I ideally, what I always had in my mind, I enjoyed Anthony Bourdain's No Reservations shows. Mm-hmm. So my idea, the best case scenario that would happen for me is that I get to actually go with a camera and a crew in the labs or in wherever that happens, so that I get to experience and explain that research. So that's like a Midsummer Night's Dream. It's like, that would be amazing. But yeah, for now, I'm also, because I come from the harder part for me to start was because I come from a radio background. Okay. I did radio when I was in Greece. So it was easier for me to do radio because I knew that every Saturday and Sunday I have those 2 hours where I have to prepare before that, go to the studio, do my show, and then forget about it.
All right.
And just now it's kind of it's opposite. Like I do the show first, and then I have to see how to promote it. So it's a learning curve for me. It's like, how do you promote? How do you start building email database for newsletters? How, like, things like that. So that's my next to-do list, like building a newsletter database for people. Which I had an idea what I want to be the newsletter, but now I need to see how do I get people to subscribe. And
right, yeah.
how do I start?
It's like you say, it's like it goes back to these like 100 steps, right, that you were mentioning earlier, where you have to go, okay, step 1 didn't work, let's go to step 2, step 3,
exactly.
go that way. Oh, that's cool.
Exactly.
So for people that want to check your podcast out or connect with you online, either on social media or website, etc., where's the best place that people can find you and learn more?
So Twitter is the main avenue that I use for the podcast. So it's Lefteris_Asks. I have my website, LefterisAsks.com, where I upload the shows there. That's the two main avenues that I use. They can now also email me, but that's a very new thing at Lefteris@LefterisAsks.com. Okay. It's a weird thing because I know that my name is not very easy to say. And but I cannot get around it.
Yeah,
I have to. So, and the name of the podcast is because I have a lot of questions. That's where this comes from. Even in my daily job, I'm the person who asks the most questions because I need to understand every single thing. So, Lefteris Asks, LefterisAsks.com and Lefteris_Asks are my Twitter handles. So that's where it's easier to see me. And I do my podcast every 2 weeks. More or less, like plus or minus a couple of days.
Yeah.
So yes, that's the avenue for me.
Okay, cool. And I'll make sure that I drop all the links to your website and the podcast, etc., into the show notes. So you're listening to this on your podcast app, be sure to check the show notes out, and you'll get the details there. All right, well, like I said, I do really appreciate you coming on, Lefteris.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it as well.
I know I'll be catching up on some of I was listening quickly to some of your earlier episodes and the trailer, so I'll be catching up on them over the next week or so. But you've definitely got a new subscriber with myself because I love the whole idea behind your show. It's awesome, so really cool to see it happen.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
No, for sure. Okay, guys, well, this has been another episode of Podcaster Stories. If you enjoyed this week's show, be sure to, leave a review on iTunes so other people can find the show too. And you can, find each episode on your favourite podcast app, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify and more. Or hop on over to podcasterstories.com where you'll find the latest episode and you can catch up on the newsletter if you want to do that. Until the next time, guys, take care, stay safe, and we'll speak soon.